I, Clara, 32 years old, female, have always been the family archivist. It wasn't just my profession, it was my role. While my older sister, Serafina, was the whirlwind of charisma and glamour. The golden child who collected accolades and admirers. I was the quiet one in the background, collecting memories. I was the one who remembered birthdays, who digitized the old, fading family photographs, and who kept the fragile threads of our history from fraying. I didn't mind the role. In fact, I cherished it. I believed that in preserving our family's story, I was preserving our family's love. It took me 32 years to realize that some stories are built on lies, and that my role was not to preserve the truth, but to quietly enable the fiction. Looking back, the signs were always there, scattered like faint cracks in the porcelain veneer of our happy family. I see them now with perfect, painful clarity. But at the time, I chose not to. I suppose, on some level, I understood that to acknowledge one crack was to admit the whole thing was in danger of shattering. It began, as it often did, with a request from Serafina. Her wedding was approaching. A grand affair meticulously designed to be the social event of the season. And she wanted a slideshow of family photos to play during the reception. Not just any slideshow. Of course. She wanted the blurry, time-worn pictures from our childhood restored, color-corrected, and woven into a seamless narrative of a perfect upbringing. It was a monumental task. One that required the specialized software and patient, meticulous skill of my profession. I spent an entire weekend, nearly 40 hours, hunched over my monitor, coaxing life back into faded images of scraped knees and birthday cakes. When I presented her with the finished product, a beautiful digital album that told our story in vibrant, restored color, she glanced at it for no more than 30 seconds. "It's fine, I guess," she said, her eyes already drifting back to her phone, where she was debating between two shades of ivory for the tablecloths. Later that evening, I overheard her on the phone with her fiancé, laughing. "You won't believe the amazing slideshow I put together," she chirped. "It took me forever, but it's perfect." I stood in the hallway, the finished album still open on my laptop, and told myself it didn't matter. Her happiness was the important thing. That was always the important thing. The cracks kept appearing. A few days later, I was at her apartment helping her sort through RSVPs when she left her laptop open. An email was on the screen. A stark red notification from a high-end credit card company. The words "final notice account past due" were impossible to miss. It was a significant amount. Enough to make my stomach clench. This directly contradicted the narrative she painted for everyone, of her contemporary art gallery being a wild success, and a testament to her flawless taste and business acumen. I felt a pang of concern, but I quickly suppressed it. I closed the laptop lid gently, as if closing a door on a secret I wasn't meant to see. I told myself that I was invading her privacy, that her finances were her own business. I chose to believe the story she told, not the evidence in front of my eyes. But the most chilling sign came a week before the end. I was at our parents' house, and Serafina was on the phone with our mother in the other room. Her voice was a low, conspiratorial whisper, but the kitchen was quiet, and I heard a fragment of the conversation that froze the blood in my veins. "Mother, don't worry," Serafina said, her voice laced with an impatience I knew all too well. "Everything will be finalized on the 22nd. She won't be able to do anything about it. She'll be too busy with her little graduation ceremony. Anyway." Little? The word echoed in the silent kitchen. My master's degree, the culmination of 2 years of relentless work, 2 of late nights and sacrificed weekends, was just a little ceremony to her. A convenient distraction. I didn't know what she was talking about, what was being finalized, but a cold dread began to settle deep within me. "Still." I pushed it down. I told myself I must have misheard. I told myself she was just stressed. I made excuses, as I always had. The breaking point, the moment the cracks spiderwebbed across the entire facade, came that Friday. We were all at our parents' for our weekly family dinner. The atmosphere was warm, filled with the aroma of our mother's roast chicken and the buzz of wedding talk. My father was beaming. My mother was fluttering around Serafina, and I was doing my part, smiling and nodding and asking the right questions. Then, Serafina cleared her throat, tapping her wine glass with a perfectly manicured nail. "I have a little announcement," she said, her smile so bright, it was almost blinding. "We've officially, finally, locked in the date with the venue. The wedding will be on Saturday, the 22nd of next month." Silence. The date hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The 22nd. The exact date of my graduation ceremony. I looked at my parents, expecting them to see the conflict, to say something, but they were just smiling, their faces aglow with pride for their golden child. My voice was barely a whisper. Sarah. That's the day of my graduation. Serafina's smile didn't falter. She let out a little, tinkling laugh. Oh, sweetie. I know. It's just how the dates worked out. You can come to the reception after your thing is over. My thing, I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. It's my master's graduation. I can't just skip it. It was our mother who spoke next, her voice dripping with disappointment. Not at Serafina, but at me. Clara. Why must you always be so selfish, she said, shaking her head. Your sister is under so much stress. Can't you just be happy for her? This is the most important day of her life. And that was it. That was the sentence. It was the moment I realized that in the carefully curated story of our family, I was not a main character. I was not even a supporting role. I was just a footnote, easily dismissed and conveniently ignored. I looked at their smiling, expectant faces. And for the first time in my life, the peace I had worked so hard to maintain felt like a cage. The drive home from my parents' house was a blur. The familiar streets of my hometown seemed alien, the warm glow of streetlights feeling cold and accusing. I didn't cry. The shock was too profound, too deep for tears. It felt less like a betrayal and more like a diagnosis. A final, irrefutable confirmation of a sickness I had long suspected but had never dared to name. My mother's words, "Why must you always be so selfish?" played on a loop in my head. For 32 years, I had bent myself into whichever shape they needed me to be, all in the name of selflessness. And in one evening, they had redefined my very existence as an act of selfishness. The next day, I tried to reason with them. One last time, I called my father, hoping that away from the performative stage of the family dinner, he might listen. Dad. I started, my voice carefully measured. I'm not asking Sarah to change her date. I just want you to understand how much this hurts. It feels like you're asking me to choose, and it feels like you've already chosen for me. He sighed. A long, weary sound that he had perfected over a lifetime of avoiding conflict. Clara. You're being dramatic. Your sister is getting married. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event. Your graduation is just a ceremony. You'll get your diploma in the mail either way. Just, for once, can you not make this difficult? Your mother and I just want a peaceful, happy celebration for your sister. A peaceful, happy celebration. The words were a quiet, brutal dismissal of my own milestone, my own happiness. I understood then that their peace was conditional, and the condition was my silence. I hung up the phone, not with anger, but with a profound and hollow sense of finality. I was well and truly alone in this. That weekend, unable to focus on anything else, I decided to tackle a project I'd been putting off, organizing my old file boxes from college. It was a mundane task, but a way to keep my hands busy and my mind from spiraling. As I sorted through old essays and financial aid documents, my fingers brushed against a folded, official-looking paper. I pulled it out. It was a durable power of attorney. I vaguely remembered it. Serafina had rushed into my dorm room with it years ago, breathlessly explaining that our parents needed it so she could handle some minor administrative tasks for our grandmother's estate while I was away at school. It's just a formality, she had said, shoving a pen into my hand. Sign here and here. And I had, without reading a single line, because I trusted her, staring at the document now, at my own looping signature at the bottom. A new kind of unease settled over me. It felt different from the hurt and anger of the past few days. This was a cold, sharp-edged feeling. It was the feeling of a key turning in a lock I didn't know existed. I refolded the paper and put it aside. But the image of my signature lingered in my mind. My graduation day arrived. Not with the joyful anticipation I had dreamed of, but under a heavy gray sky that mirrored my mood. I went through the motions, accepting my diploma with a polite smile, posing for a photo with my thesis advisor. My friends were going out to celebrate, but I couldn't bring myself to join them. The thought of feigning happiness was exhausting. Instead, I went home, changed out of my cap and gown, and sat on my sofa in the quiet of my apartment. I scrolled aimlessly through my phone, my thumb tracing patterns on the glass. I opened a real estate app, a habit I'd formed after my grandmother passed. She had left her small, charming house to Serafina and me jointly in her will. I had set up an alert for the address, not because I ever intended to sell, but because it made me feel connected to her. Seeing her home still standing. A quiet monument to the only person in my family who had always made me feel seen. And it was in that moment of quiet defeat that the truth found me. Not with a whisper, but with a cold. Digitalchim. A notification appeared at the top of my screen. My heart stopped. It was from the app. I had never received a notification for that property before. My fingers trembled as I tapped it open. The screen loaded, displaying a picture of my grandmother's house. Her beloved rose bushes blooming in the front yard. And beneath it, in stark, black and white letters, were the words, "I will never forget. Status update pending sale." I stared at the screen. The words blurring together. Pending sale. It didn't make sense. It couldn't be. We hadn't listed the house. I hadn't signed anything. And then, like a series of flashbulbs going off in a dark room, everything became brutally clear. The whispered phone call. Everything will be finalized on the 22nd. The forgotten power of attorney document. The wedding date. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't an oversight. It was a meticulously planned diversion. My little graduation was the perfect alibi. The perfect distraction to keep me occupied, while my sister and my parents stole my inheritance right out from under me. In a single second, the hurt I had felt before seemed trivial. A pale shadow compared to the vast, cold reality of this betrayal. It was in that moment, sitting alone in my apartment, that the woman who always chose peace, the woman who always backed down, finally died. And someone new began to take her place. For a long time, I just sat there. The glow of the phone screen illuminating the dust motes, dancing in the silent air of my apartment. The initial shock began to recede. And in its place, a cold, crystalline anger started to form. It was an emotion so pure and so potent that it felt unfamiliar in my own body. The hurt was still there. A deep, huzanash. But the anger was a shield. A new kind of armor. I had spent my entire life absorbing blows to keep the peace. Now, I understood. There was no peace to keep. There was only a carefully constructed lie. And I was no longer willing to live inside of it. My first move was not one of aggression, but of strategic retreat. I picked up my phone, my fingers steady, and composed a text message to Serafina. "I'm sorry for my reaction the other night." I wrote, "You were right. Your wedding is the most important thing. I was being selfish. I hope you have the most beautiful day. Congratulations." I hit send without a moment's hesitation. I knew my sister. My apology would not be seen as an olive branch, but as a white flag of surrender. It would soothe her ego, confirm her victory, and most importantly, it would make her careless. An arrogant opponent is a predictable opponent. My next step required a different kind of courage. I went back to the old file box and retrieved the power of attorney. Then, I searched online for the name of the law firm that had handled my grandmother's will. The firm was still in business, and the senior partner listed was a name I recognized, Mr. Alistair Finch. He had been my grandmother's lawyer for over 40 years. A kind, silver-haired man who always had a Werther's original candy for me when I was a child. I prayed he was still there. He was, when his secretary put me through. His voice was older, a little gravelly, but still warm. "Clara, my goodness. Is that you? I haven't heard from your family in ages. How are you?" "My dear, I'm well. Mr. Finch." "Thank you," I said, my voice shaking slightly, despite myself. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to ask you a question about my grandmother's will. Specifically, about the house." I explained what I had discovered. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When he finally spoke, his warm tone was gone, replaced by a steely seriousness. "Clara," he said slowly, "I can tell you with 100% certainty that I have received no request to sell that property. Your grandmother's instructions were ironclad. The house was to remain in joint ownership until both you and your sister agreed to sell. The use of a general power of attorney to circumvent that is not just unethical, it is textbook fraudulent conveyance." His words validated everything. I wasn't being dramatic. I wasn't being selfish. I was being robbed. He asked me to send him a copy of the document I had found and any other relevant paperwork. "I'll look into this immediately," he assured me. "Don't say another word to your family. Not one word." That night, I began my work. As an archivist, I knew that the past is never truly gone, it just gets filed away. I started digging through every box of old family documents I possessed, searching for anything that might help Mr. Finch. Old bank statements, letters, tax records. It was in a dusty box labeled miscellaneous tapes that I found them, a stack of old VHS cassettes from the late 90s. Most were labeled with things like Christmas 1998 or Sarah's 10th birthday. My job involved digitizing old media. So I had the equipment at my apartment, almost on autopilot. I began the process of converting the tapes, my mind still racing with legal terms and the sting of betrayal. I let the tapes play on a monitor as they digitized. The grainy, ghost-like figures of our younger selves flickering across the screen. I watched myself as a quiet, bookish child, always in the shadow of Serafina's bright, demanding presence. I saw the pattern. Repeated, over and over, she would perform. And I would applaud. She would demand. And I would concede. Then, one tape, unlabeled, began to play. The image was shaky at first. It was my grandmother, sitting in her favorite armchair, the one with the floral print. She was looking directly into the camera, which was clearly being held by my grandfather. She looked older, more frail than I remembered. "Is it on, Harold?" she asked, and his muffled voice confirmed it was. She took a deep breath. "Sarah, Clara," she said, her voice soft but clear. "If you're watching this, it means I'm gone. There's so much I want to tell you both." She spoke for a few minutes about her love for them. For us. Then, she paused, and her eyes seemed to find mine through the lens. "Across the years, Clara, my sweet girl," she said, and my heart seized in my chest. "I need to say something just for you. I know things aren't always easy. I see how you yield, how you bend to keep everyone happy. It is a kindness in you, my dear. But the world is not always kind in return." She leaned forward slightly. "That house is more than just bricks and mortar. It is your security. It is your anchor. I have tied it to you and your sister equally, so that no one can ever take your share from you. Promise, May," she implored, her gaze piercing. "Promise your old grandmother, you will always protect it. Protect your inheritance. Protect yourself." I sat there in the dark, tears streaming down my face. As my grandmother's image faded to static, the sadness I felt was immense. But it wasn't a weakening sadness. It was a clarifying one. In that moment, watching the ghost of the one person who had truly seen me, I felt the last of my hesitation burn away. The sadness didn't disappear, it simply condensed into a single, unshakable objective. I had my evidence. I had my ally. And now, I had my mandate. He had made a promise. The days that followed were a masterclass in duality. To my family, I was the dutiful, apologetic daughter, sending cheerful texts asking about wedding details and wishing them well. But in reality, every spare moment was spent on the phone with Mr. Pallant, Finch, methodically building our case. We were no longer just trying to stop a sale. We were preparing for war. My role as the family archivist had inadvertently trained me for this moment. I unearthed years of financial records, emails, and letters, each one a small and forgotten piece of a much larger puzzle of manipulation and financial deceit. The first move on the chessboard was not mine, but Mr. Finch's. He explained the strategy to me in his calm, reassuring voice. "We will not show our hand just yet, Clara," he had said. "We will simply make it impossible for them to proceed." He filed a lis pendens with the county recorder's office. It was a simple legal notice, a public declaration that the property at my grandmother's address was subject to a pending lawsuit. It was an invisible tripwire, silent and deadly, that would instantly halt any attempt to close the sale. The call came to Serafina 3 days before her wedding. I can picture the scene so vividly. She was likely at her gallery, surrounded by stark white walls and overpriced art, perhaps finalizing the seating chart. Her brow furrowed in concentration over whether to place Uncle Robert next to his estranged wife. Her world was a bubble of tulle and champagne, a world where she was the undisputed queen. And then the phone rang. It was the real estate agent, and his voice a frantic buzz of legal jargon she couldn't possibly comprehend. "There's a cloud on the title, Ms. Vance," he would have stammered. "A lis pendens was filed this morning. We can't close. The sale is on indefinite hold." Her confusion would have quickly curdled into fury. This was an unforeseen complication, a smudge on her perfect canvas. The money from the sale was supposed to be transferred the day before the wedding, a crucial infusion of cash to pay the final, exorbitant bills for the caterers, the florist, the 10-piece band. Her first and only suspect was me. My phone rang less than 5 minutes later. "What did you do?" she shrieked, her voice stripped of all its polished charm. There was no greeting, no preamble, just raw, unfiltered rage. I feigned confusion, a skill I was rapidly mastering. What are you talking about? Sarah, I'm at the library. Researching. Don't you lie to me, she yelled. Her voice cracking. The house sale. It's been stopped. There's some legal thing on it. This has your name written all over it. You're trying to ruin my wedding. I took a slow, deliberate breath. Sarah. I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. I said. My voice as calm and placid as a still lake. I'm getting ready for my graduation. Isn't today your rehearsal dinner? You should probably be focusing on that. I could hear her sputtering on the other end. Speechless with a rage that had no outlet. She knew I was responsible. But she couldn't prove it. And my calm denial was a wall she couldn't breach. Before she could find her words, I said, I have to go. Good luck tonight. And I hung up the phone. I sat in the quiet of the library, my heart hammering against my ribs. But a small, fierce smile touched my lips. The first piece had been moved. The queen was in check. But what I didn't know, what none of us could have possibly known, was that our quiet family drama was about to attract a much more powerful player. Miles away, in a sleek high-rise office overlooking the city, another man received a notification. Serafina's fiancé, William, came from a family of immense wealth, built over generations, in the world of high-stakes commercial real estate. His father, Arthur Kensington, was not just a businessman, he was a titan. A man whose name was spoken with a mixture of fear and reverence. He was a man who monitored the real estate market with the obsessive precision of a hawk. With automated alerts, set for any legal filings on properties in key residential zones that just so happened to include my grandmother's quiet, tree-lined street. A notification pinged on his computer. Notice of list pendants filed. It read, followed by the address of the house. To him, it was a minor piece of data. A ripple in the market. But the owner's name, Vance, was now familiar to him. It was the name of the family his only son was about to marry into. His brow furrowed. He was a man who detested surprises. And he considered financial instability, especially the kind that led to lawsuits, to be a sign of weak character. He picked up his phone. Not to call his son, but to call his personal legal team. There's a new filing on a property on Oakwood Lane, he said. His voice a low baritone that commanded immediate action. The name is Vance. I want to know everything about it. And I want to know by morning. Panic is a clumsy architect. It builds walls of lies that have no foundation and escape routes that lead directly into traps. For her entire life, Serafina had been insulated from real consequences. Our parents had been her tireless fixers, smoothing over every mistake, paying off every debt, and reframing every character flaw as an amusing eccentricity. So, when faced with a problem she couldn't charm or bully her way out of, she reverted to the only tactic she knew. She sent in our parents. They appeared at my apartment door the next morning. Their faces a carefully rehearsed tableau of sorrow and righteous indignation. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed, a handkerchief clutched in her hand. My father stood behind her, his arms crossed, his expression one of profound disappointment. It was a performance I had seen 100 times before. The opening act of a guilt trip. Clara. How could you? My mother began, her voice trembling. Your sister is a wreck. You're destroying her wedding, her happiness, all because of some petty jealousy. We are so disappointed in you, my father added, his voice heavy with paternal judgment. To be so cruel, so close to her big day. This isn't the daughter we raised. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply invited them in and asked them to sit down. I let them talk, their accusations washing over me. They spoke of family loyalty. I, of sacrifice. Of Serafina's fragile nerves. As they spoke, I quietly placed my phone on the coffee table between us. The screen dark. I let the recording app run, capturing every word. When they finally ran out of steam, I looked at them, my expression calm. Are you finished? I asked. Because if you are, I have to get back to my work. I have a lot to do. Their shock was palpable. They had expected tears. Apologies. A retraction. They were not prepared for calm indifference. They left in a flurry of huffed pronouncements and dire warnings. But I knew I had disarmed them. They had no power over me anymore. Meanwhile, Serafina was making her own unforced errors. With the house money frozen and her wedding bills coming due, she was desperate. Her solution was as reckless as it was predictable. She sold a major painting from her gallery, a rising artist centerpiece, for a significant sum, cash on the spot, to a private collector. The problem was, the painting was on consignment. It didn't belong to her. It was a loan from the artist. who was expecting it to be the highlight of an upcoming exhibition. When the artist called to check on the piece later that day, Serafina concocted a flimsy story about it being professionally cleaned. But the art world is small and gossipy. Within hours, the artist heard from a friend who had heard from the collector. The truth was out. An email landed in Serafina's inbox. Its subject line stark and unforgiving: urgent breach of consignment agreement, and intent to pursue legal action. She was no longer just dealing with a family dispute. She was now facing professional ruin and a lawsuit that could destroy her gallery for good. But the final, devastating blow came not from a lawyer or a furious artist, but from the one person she thought she had secured. Arthur Kensington's legal team had been brutally efficient. By morning, he had a full report on his desk, detailing the fraudulent conveyance, the forged signature on the power of attorney, and the pending lawsuit filed by Mr. Finch on my behalf. Arthur did not call Serafina. He did not call my parents. He called his son, William, and laid out the facts in his typically blunt, unsentimental manner. He presented the situation not as a family drama, but as a business liability, of the merger with a company that had cooked its books and was on the verge of a hostile takeover. William arrived at Serafina's gallery that evening. She likely thought he was there to comfort her, to rage against the terrible sister who was trying to ruin their perfect wedding. But his face was a mask of stone. My father's lawyers found the court filing. "Sarah," he said, his voice devoid of all warmth. "They found the power of attorney. Explain it to me." This was the moment her world truly fractured. She fell back on her oldest, the most practiced skill, playing the victim. Tears streamed down her face as she wove a tragic tale. She admitted to the sale, but framed it as a desperate act to save her gallery. A secret she was keeping, to avoid burdening him. She claimed the power of attorney was a misunderstanding, a document our parents had told her was fine to use. And she painted me as a vengeful, jealous sister, who had discovered her secret, and was now using it to blackmail the family, and destroy her happiness. It was a masterful performance. It might have even worked on the man who had been blinded by her charm for the past 2 years. But he was no longer just a fiancé, he was the son of Arthur Kensington. And he was seeing her now through his father's eyes. He saw the liability. He saw the risk. He listened to her entire, tear-soaked monologue without interruption. When she was finally finished, hiccuping an apology and begging for his understanding, he was silent for a long moment. Then, he looked at her, his eyes clear and cold, and delivered the sentence that shattered what was left of her carefully constructed world. "The wedding," he said, his voice flat and final, "is postponed. Indefinitely. An indefinitely postponed wedding is a quiet explosion. There's no single, loud bung, but the shockwaves radiate outwards, causing silent, catastrophic damage. The news ripped through our extended family and Serafina's social circle with the speed of gossip. A torrent of cancelled flights, returned gifts, and hushed, speculative phone calls. The perfect narrative Serafina had spent years crafting was unraveling in real time, and she had no way to stop it. In the midst of this chaos, I received an unexpected invitation, a call from a number I didn't recognize. A polite, professional secretary, requesting my presence at the downtown offices of Kensington Properties. Arthur Kensington wanted to meet with me. I walked into a boardroom that was larger than my entire apartment, with a polished mahogany table that reflected the glittering city skyline. Arthur Kensington was exactly as I had imagined, impeccably dressed, with eyes that seemed to assess my net worth and moral character in a single, sweeping glance. "Mr. Finch sat beside me." A calm, grounding presence. Arthur did not waste time with pleasantries. "Ms. Vance," he began, his voice a calm rumble of authority. "I have reviewed the documents my legal team procured, as well as the preliminary findings from Mr. Finch. I want to apologize on behalf of my family for the distress this situation has caused you." He paused, letting the words settle. "I also want to thank you. You have saved my son, and by extension, my family, from a very costly and embarrassing mistake." He then made an offer that stunned me. He offered me the full resources of his formidable legal team, pro bono, to ensure a swift and just resolution. It was a staggering display of power. And in that moment, the dynamic of my quiet war shifted irrevocably. I was no longer a lone woman fighting her family. I was backed by a king. The pressure on my parents was clearly mounting. The public shame of a cancelled wedding, combined with the terrifying, unspoken threat of the Kensington family's involvement, had pushed them to the brink. It was my mother who cracked first. She called me that evening, her voice a frantic, tearful mess. She didn't yell this time. She pleaded. "Clara, please," she sobbed. "You have to stop this. Call off your lawyer. Serafina is beside herself. William won't even speak to her. You've made your point. You've punished her enough. I remained silent, letting her talk. And in her desperation, she made the fatal error I had been waiting for. We were only trying to help her, she cried. Her voice breaking. She was in so much trouble. With the gallery? The debts. We just wanted to help her. We never thought you'd find out. It was a full confession, delivered in a torrent of self-pity. We never thought you'd find out. I held the phone. My heart a cold. Heavy stone in my chest. I had the recording from their visit to my apartment. And now, this. Her admission. Her complicity. Was undeniable. I have to go. Mother, I said softly. And ended the call. The final pillar of Serafina's support system crumbled the next day. It was my father. He, who had always been Serafina's staunchest defender. The stoic patriarch who saw her flaws as strengths and my strengths as failings. He called me. And for the first time in my life, I heard something in his voice I had never heard before, fear. I spoke with Alistair Finch. He said, his voice low and strained. There was no anger. No judgment. Just a deep, world-weary exhaustion. He was very clear about the legal ramifications. Fraud. Forgery. Criminal charges. He took a shaky breath. Clara, what do you want? Just tell me what you want to make this go away. We can't have a public lawsuit. We can't have the Kensingtons involved. This has to be handled within the family. Within the family. The same family that had conspired to steal from me. That had dismissed me. That had called me selfish for wanting what was rightfully mine. They had cast me out when they thought I was weak. And now that I was strong, they wanted to pull me back into the fold to protect themselves from the consequences. I listened to him. To the panic and desperation threading through his voice. And I realized the profound truth. He wasn't trying to protect Serafina anymore. He was trying to protect himself. His loyalty. Her mother's love, it had all been conditional. Predicated on her success, and their ability to live vicariously through it. Now that she was a liability. A threat to their comfortable lives and carefully constructed reputation. They were cutting her loose. I want a meeting, I said. My voice clear and steady. You. Me? Mom. And Serafina. No one else. We'll settle this. Once and for all. He agreed immediately. A wave of relief, audible in his voice. He thought this was his chance to negotiate. To manage the fallout. He had no idea he was simply agreeing to the time and place of his daughter's final, unconditional surrender. I chose the location for our final meeting with deliberate, surgical precision. Not a sterile law office. Not our parents' tense and suffocating living room. But the grand ballroom of the hotel, where Serafina's wedding was supposed to have taken place. When I made the arrangement, the event manager was confused but accommodating. I suppose she assumed it was for some kind of post-cancellation, reconciliation. In a way, she was right. It was a reconciliation. Just not the kind she imagined. It was my reconciliation with the truth. They arrived together. A united front of frayed nerves and false bravado. My father looked grim. My mother's face was puffy from crying. And Serafina, she had draped herself in an air of wounded nobility. A tragic heroine in a very expensive cashmere sweater. They walked into the cavernous, silent ballroom. Their footsteps echoing on the polished marble floor. The room was a ghost of a celebration. Tables and chairs still draped in white linen. The dance floor empty and expectant. They looked at me, standing alone in the center of the room. And I could see a flicker of hope in their eyes. They saw one woman. They thought they had the numbers. They thought this was a negotiation. Clara. This is ridiculous. My father began. His voice attempting a familiar, paternal authority. What is the meaning of this? Before I could answer, the large double doors at the end of the ballroom swung open again. Two men walked in, William. And his father. Arthur Kensington. The shift in the room was instantaneous. The air crackled with tension. My mother gasped. Her hand flying to her mouth. My father's face went pale. Serafina looked as though she had been struck. Her hope of a private, emotional manipulation session. Her last remaining strategy. Evaporated in an instant. This was not a family squabble anymore. This was a corporate takeover. And she was the failing company being liquidated. They sat. A silent, miserable trio. Across a large, round table from me. Mr. Finch. And the Kensingtons. I remained standing. Thank you all for coming. I began. My voice even and clear. Resonating in the quiet of the vast room. I called this meeting because I believe in clarity. For my entire life, our family has operated in a thick fog of unspoken rules, and of subtle manipulations, and carefully ignored truths. Today, we are going to clear the air. I laid it all out. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I presented the facts with the cool, detached precision of an archivist presenting her findings. I placed a copy of the fraudulent power of attorney on the table. I played the audio recording of my mother's tearful phone call, her voice filling the silent room with the damning words. "We never thought you'd find out." I played the recording of my father's fearful plea, begging me to handle it within the family. I had Mr. Minio Finch summarize the legal consequences: grand larceny, fraud, potential jail time. My parents stared at the table, their faces ashen. They had nothing to say. Their own words had condemned them. But Serafina, even then, tried to fight. She rose to her feet, tears welling in her eyes. The picture of a wronged woman. "This is a betrayal," she cried, her voice ringing with manufactured outrage. She looked at William. "Don't you see what she's doing? She was always jealous of me. Ick of us. She's twisting everything. Trying to ruin my life because she doesn't have one of her own." I let her finish. I let the ugly, desperate words hang in the air. And when she was done, I simply nodded to the event technician I had hired, who was waiting discreetly in the corner. "Now," I said softly. The large projector screens on either side of the ballroom, the same screens that were meant to display her perfect wedding slideshow, flickered to life. And there was our grandmother's face, kind and wrinkled, her eyes full of a love that felt like a physical presence in the room. Her voice, soft but strong, filled the silence. "Clara, my sweet girl," she said. "I see how you yield, how you bend to keep everyone happy. That house is your security. It is your anchor. Promise me you will always protect it. Protect yourself." The video ended. The screen went dark. No one moved. The emotional weight of our grandmother's words, her final wish so brutally and cynically betrayed, was suffocating. Serafina stood frozen, her mask of victimhood shattered, exposing the raw, ugly truth beneath. She had not just stolen from me. She had desecrated a memory. She had betrayed a promise made to a dying woman. Arthur Kensington was the first to rise. He looked at my parents and Serafina with an expression of pure, unadulterated contempt. "Our families will not be joined," he said, his voice like chipping ice. "And you can expect to hear from our legal counsel regarding the emotional distress and financial costs incurred by this fraudulent engagement." He and William turned and walked out of the ballroom without a backward glance. I looked at my sister, at the ruins of her life, a mess entirely of her own making. She stared at me, her eyes finally empty of tricks and full of a dawning, horrified understanding. I picked up my bag. "This chess game," I said, my voice quiet, but carrying in the vast, empty room. "You didn't lose today, Sarah. You lost the moment you mistook my silence for weakness." Then I, too, turned and walked away. Victory is not always allowed. Triomphe en parade. Sometimes, it is the quiet, steady dawn that follows a long and violent storm. I walked out of that ballroom and did not look back. I left the wreckage of my old family behind and began the slow, deliberate work of building a life on my own terms. A life built not on shifting sands of lies, but on the solid ground of truth. The legal fallout was swift and merciless. Faced with irrefutable evidence and the looming threat of the Kensington legal machine, my family had no choice but to capitulate completely. Serafina signed over her half of our grandmother's house to me as part of a settlement to avoid criminal prosecution. She was forced to declare bankruptcy. Her gallery's assets seized to pay off the furious artist and a dozen other creditors. Her name, once a fixture on the society pages, became a whispered cautionary tale. I did not follow the drama. I instructed Mr. Finch to handle everything and did my best to disconnect. I sold my small apartment and moved into my grandmother's house, the very anchor she had intended it to be. The silence of the old house was a balm. For the first few weeks, I did nothing but walk through the rooms, touching the familiar furniture, tending to her rose bushes, and letting the quiet seep into my bones. I was not celebrating a victory. I was mourning a loss, the loss of the family I thought I had, the love I thought was real. 6 months later, the house was no longer just a home. It was a sanctuary. I had transformed the upper floor into a state-of-the-art private archive, the Vance Legacy Center. I started my own business, helping other families preserve their histories, digitizing their old films and photos, and giving their memories a future. I was doing the work I loved, on my own terms, in a place that felt like a fortress of peace. I was finally For the first time in my life. Whole. I heard about my family in fragments. Mr. Finch would mention updates during our occasional calls. Serafina was working a retail job in a different city, trying to piece her life back together under a cloud of shame. My parents had sold their large house and downsized. Estranged from both their daughters and the community, they had worked so hard to impress. I felt a distant, theoretical sadness for them. But it was like looking at a photograph of people I used to know. The emotional connection had been severed. One crisp autumn afternoon, a package arrived. It was a small, unassuming cardboard box with no return address. Just my name, and the house's address written in a familiar, spidery script. My father's handwriting. My first instinct was to throw it away. To not let any part of the past breach the peace I had so carefully constructed. But curiosity won out. Inside, there was no long, rambling letter of apology. No desperatería for forgiveness. There was only one thing, a small, faded photograph from the early 90s. It was a picture of my father and me at a county fair. I must have been about 5 years old. Perched on his shoulders. My face sticky with cotton candy. Laughing with pure, unadulterated joy. He was looking up at me. And his face held an expression of such open, uncomplicated love that it made my throat ache. It was a look I had not seen on his face in a very, very long time. Tucked under the photo was a small, plain white card. On it, he had written just 10 words. I remember who you were. I am sorry I forgot. I stood there in my sunlit hallway, the photo in my hand, and cried. Not tears of anger or sadness, but tears of release. It was not a magical fix. It did not erase the years of pain or undo the profound betrayal, but it was an acknowledgement. It was a single, flickering candle in a vast darkness. It was the truth. I placed the photo on the mantelpiece, next to a picture of my grandmother. I did not call him. I did not write back. Forgiveness was a mountain I was not yet ready to climb. But as I looked at the two photos, the woman who had always seen me and the man who had finally remembered, I felt the last, heavy chain of the past fall away. The story was over. And a new one, entirely my own, was just beginning. The story of Clara and her family is a powerful and poignant reminder of a difficult truth. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love us the most can become the source of our deepest pain. Her journey teaches us that true strength isn't always loud. It isn't about shouting in the middle of a fight. Often, it is the quiet resolve to stop accepting disrespect, the courage to gather facts while others assume you are passive, and the wisdom to choose your moment not for revenge, but for reclamation, reclaiming your story, your inheritance, and your peace of mind. For anyone who has ever felt like the lesser child, who has silenced their own needs to keep a fragile family peace, we see you. We understand the unique pain of being overlooked by those whose validation you crave the most. Remember that setting a boundary to protect yourself from manipulation and betrayal is not an act of selfishness. It is a profound and necessary act of self-respect. You have the right to demand the truth, and to walk away from a table where love is served with conditions. And that brings us to our final question for you. If you were in Clara's position, would you have chosen her path of quiet, strategic action? Or would you have confronted the betrayal head-on from the very beginning? And perhaps the bigger question is, can a family ever truly heal from a wound this deep? Share your stories and your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. Story 2. After missing Stephen's first birthday, my dad declared, "We don't accept this grandson." I lost my temper. Then never again asked me for money, bills, or assistance. I froze all of their money, turned off their heat, and reclaimed the SUV. In the past, I was the type of guy who kept quiet and gave money to everyone. Whenever my parents inquired as to whether they had said anything upsetting to me, I ignored it. If they treated my wife, Nancy, disrespectfully, later on, I would justify them by saying things like they didn't mean it or that's just the way they act. I handed them money without hesitation if they ever needed it for rent, auto repairs, or other issues. I had been doing this for a while. I couldn't explain why, but it seemed like something I had to do. Years of shame and emotional control during my upbringing molded it into a perverted form of loyalty. My father shamed me until I gave in as part of his parenting style, teaching me how to be a man. He said. My mother was no better. She simply remained silent during it. Their distaste became more intense when I married Nancy. Their disdain for her was hardly concealed. She didn't come from a wealthy family. She never attended college. She was employed in a shop, and that somehow diminished her value in their eyes. I tried to patch things up between them for years. Even though I knew Nancy would leave feeling disappointed, I would still accompany her to family meals. Even when they unintentionally placed offensive remarks in front of her, I chose to ignore them. To be honest, I was afraid to speak up. But I convinced myself that I was only attempting to keep everyone quiet. Although Nancy never pushed me to choose between them and herself. I could tell by the way she looked at me at the end of each visit that she was unsure if she was marrying a genuine man or a grown kid who was still pleading with his parents for acceptance. With the birth of our son Stephen, everything changed. I was holding him in my arms on that first night in the hospital. Something clicked into place for me. It was as though I had suddenly realized that he was the one person I couldn't let down. Not the way I would disappoint Nancy. And not the way my parents let me down. I began to make adjustments throughout the ensuing months. I ceased answering the phone. If I was unwilling to speak. Every time they made a suggestion that they required anything, I stopped providing money. I began prioritizing Stephen and Nancy over everyone else. It was the correct thing to do. Not because I was angry. Then Stephen's first birthday arrived. We didn't make it big. It's just a backyard barbecue. Nancy's parents. A few close friends. And several neighbors. Out of habit. I invited my folks. Above all, I didn't anticipate their appearance. My dad called a few days later. He wasted no time. They wouldn't be coming. He said. We really don't need this. He said. This grandchild is not acceptable to us. That was it. No sentiments. No justification. I refrained from arguing. I made no inquiries. Okay. But don't ask me for help anymore. I said. No bills. No money. No issues. After pausing, he burst out laughing as if it were all a joke. The next time they utilized guilt, I would be like, I'd come groveling back. He was unaware that I had already decided what I wanted to do, and I made sure that it arrived in their mailbox like a wrapped present 2 days later. In actuality, they weren't simply missing a birthday celebration. More than just cake and decorations were on the horizon. I left a thin envelope. But what was inside was important. There was a letter on it. Not angry. Not flamboyant. Just definitive and unambiguous. Over the years, I documented everything they had taken for me. I never requested for the return of any of the money I sent or borrowed. Each time they placed me down, I remained mute. A total of $95. 000 was at the bottom. The total came to that amount. I also supplied a spreadsheet with bank record data and dates, arranged by color. On paper, it was a detailed account of the years I served as their safety net. I didn't want any of it returned. The point wasn't that. All I wanted was for them to realize the price. It cost me money. But it also cost me silence. All those years, it wasn't the biggest shock. Though, I eventually did what I should have done a long time ago, a few weeks before to that birthday celebration. I legally broke off my relationship with them. I removed their names from every form I had for emergency contacts. And altered the ownership of our house, and reclaimed the legal rights they didn't even know they still held. They also amended the will that had previously graciously included them. Nancy was the only one who owned it. Along with cutting off all financial and legal ties between us. I also changed who would receive my life insurance. I ended it abruptly. But inside the envelope, I had one last thing planned. I put one more note there. I had a lawyer on board. Not a fancy one. Just a local lawyer who sent them a legal warning by handling family cases in small cases. They were prohibited from speaking to me. Nancy. Or our son Stephen after that. No phone calls. And no messages from friends or family. And that was it. I anticipated hearing nothing for some time. A few irate voicemails. Perhaps. However, my sister called me 3 days later. She and I hadn't really kept in contact. She had been in and out of our lives constantly. As if she was unable to decide whether or not she wanted to be here. I thought she would yell at me when I answered the phone. But she informed me that I had just received the same letter. As it happened, I wasn't alone. While I was spending my money on their insatiable needs, they had been draining my finances. In private, they were treating her in the same way. They maxed out her credit card, used her car, and even had her co-sign. But she never saw any money. Her voice was one of exhaustion. As if she had just realized that she had been submerged for years. Then she revealed something unexpected to me. Mom and I chatted yesterday. She was crying. I don't understand why you're doing this. She said. She believes you're exaggerating the situation. I didn't say anything. She really doesn't see it. Samuel. She said she truly believes she did nothing wrong. That didn't shock me. What caught me off guard was what she said next. She told me she was cutting them off. 2. She said my letter opened her eyes. She and her fiancé had decided to end their relationship for good. And they were moving far away in a month. She thanked me. She said I might have helped her escape a future that looked just like mine. Then she asked if she could see Stephen before they left. She said she wanted to really spend time with her nephew properly. This time without drama. And that's when I realized something I hadn't planned. I wasn't only closing a door. I was opening a new one. 2 weeks after Steven's party. My dad finally responded. Not with a phone call. Not with an apology. He sent an angry email subject line. What is all this? No. Hello. No punctuation. Just 5 bitter words from a man who always pretended he was untouchable. I read it twice. Then closed it. That was both the first and last message from him that I opened. I didn't reply, because that email wasn't really for me. It was a way to try to stay in control. He wanted me to chase him. To break the silence. To explain my actions. But sometimes silence says more than words. Especially when there's nothing left to discuss. And that's when things really started falling apart. I began getting calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in ages. Uncle Patrick. The one who once asked for cash to fix his mess after losing money gambling. Left me a voicemail. He said I should fix things with my parents before it got worse. Then my cousin Rebecca sent Nancy a Facebook message, asking if she could help change my mind. They kept showing up. One after the other. All repeating the same line. They're your parents. You only get one set. I didn't answer anyone. Not because I was mad. But because I had finally figured out what was happening. They were pulling the last strings they had left. But those strings were old. Weak. And held by people who didn't even know the full story. But what crossed the line was when my mom messaged Nancy directly. It was long. It was cruel. She claimed Nancy had twisted my thinking. She said Nancy turned me into someone unrecognizable. She said Steven wasn't truly part of the family, and never would be. She said we were selfish. She said if we wanted to play this game, we would lose more than just relatives. She ended the message with a line. I still remember clearly we made you, and we can unmake you. That's when I knew this wasn't just a family disagreement anymore. This was a full-on battle, and I wasn't going to fight with rage. I would fight smart. First. He contacted Melier. I told him to add that message to our file for harassment. We began the steps to apply for a legal restraining order. I didn't want to use it unless absolutely necessary. But I wanted to be ready. Then I went after the things they assumed I'd never touch. Through the passing years, I had been silently covering their expenses, while they remained unaware of just how much authority I truly possessed. The electricity account. It was registered to me. So I shut it off. The heating service terminated their cell phone service, was still connected to a shared family plan I'd been paying for since college. I cut it off with zero notice. The vehicle loan for her old SUV. Still listed under my name. I phoned the lender and stated that it was being used without consent. The vehicle was taken back within days. Then I went back and reviewed old records. In the year 2019, my father sought for a personal loan. Using my information. He stated it was to tackle an important family situation. At that time, I was too weary to resist it. He fabricated my name. Skipped payments on multiple times. And when I eventually heard about it, I cleared the bill myself to maintain my credit rating. However, I retained every paperwork and receipt. Recently, I made an official report of identity misuse to the banking institution and asked for an internal examination. Within 2 full days, all of their bank accounts were stopped. Every dime was unreachable, as the fraud investigation team looked through each associated transaction. My sister was the one who broke the news. She sent a text message. What did you just do there in full panic mode? I didn't write back promptly. Later, I submitted one sentence. I quit hiding the truth for them. Apparently, they had convinced themselves I'd never crossed that boundary. That no matter what happened, I'd always be there to save them. They assumed that I would continue to save them. To put up with their brutality. And to act as though we were a typical, devoted family. They didn't anticipate my shattering that illusion. They were sitting in their dilapidated home now. No vehicle. No phone service. No heating. And no money. My mom attempted borrowing a neighbor's phone to call me. Weeping and pleading. She left a message asking how I could have done this to my parents. They couldn't even afford to buy food. She added. And they were chilly and scared. I didn't feel ashamed. Though. I felt conscious. As though I had finally woken up from a childhood dream. Nancy and I took Steven to the aquarium that day. We purchased ice cream. Together. We chuckled. I felt like a true parent for the first time in years. As opposed to a son who is continuously split in two. Nancy glanced up at me at dinner that night and said, "They're not going to recover from this. Are they?" Since I already knew they had been gone for a while. I shook my head gently. I just stopped acting as though they were valuable at last. I thought my relationship with my parents would conclude amicably. A few signals of emotional guilt. Perhaps some gossip got out behind my back. However, I fully comprehended. I was unaware of the extent of their harm. And I wasn't prepared for what would occur when everyone else began to realize the reality. It started with my cousin Brandon. After my sister told him what had happened, how I had cut them off. Stopped their funding. and reported the illegal loan we had not communicated for a long time. He got in touch with me right away. He made a straightforward opening statement. "This is what I've been waiting for." He then provided screenshots as a follow-up. "My folks sent me a text message years ago. It turns out that after Brandon's mother was laid off, my father had promised to assist her refinance her mortgage. However, rather of offering assistance, they persuaded her to pledge a portion of her home as collateral for the loan. Although the agreement was legally enforceable, the assistance never materialized." She followed up. "But they didn't give a single penny. They informed her that it was now too difficult to resolve the issue. After a while, she stopped trying. After Brandon, it was evident that they had emptied not only me but also Angela. One more cousin. Is it true that you cut ties with them?" she inquired over the phone. I verified it. She laughed bitterly. She said, "It's about time someone developed a spine." She went on to say that a long time ago, my dad persuaded her to give him $12,000 from a modest fortune she had inherited following the death of her father. He promised to invest the funds and assist her in making future plans. Later, when she mentioned it, it vanished. She was betraying the family, according to my mom, who also accused her of being selfish. Her money was never returned. And it didn't stop there. As it turned out, my parents had gently and gradually hurt a huge number of individuals, and no one had ever been able to piece it all together. However, once I took action, it was as if a light had been turned on. Everyone started to see that the same two individuals had used them in somewhat different ways. Even others outside of our family began getting in touch with me. I received an email from a man named Harold. He said that in 2017, he was a member of the same church as my parents. They were on the verge of losing their house. So my father begged him for $3. Babe. He received the cash from Harold. In 3 months, my dad assured him it will be returned. That never took place. Rather, my father stopped attending that church and started circulating rumors that Harold was troublesome and mentally ill. What followed, however, was much more devastating. Brandon's mom. I got a call from my aunt. Although she spoke quietly, her tone shook, as if the truth had been lodged in her for a while. She said that after my grandmother passed away, your mother stole money from her. I was still a college student. I assumed everything passed to my parents and didn't participate in the inheritance procedure. However, that was untrue. Grandma had stored a collection of rare coins, ancient savings bonds, and some priceless vintage jewelry in a safe deposit box. In a handwritten letter, she requested that her children divide these. Neither of my parents ever spoke. Soon after her death, they cleared the box, informed everyone that Grandma hadn't left anything behind, and sold the goods in secret. The change started at that point. Brandon's mother engaged a lawyer. A civil complaint was filed by Angela, another relative, whom I hardly recognized from previous get-togethers, filed a report alleging that my mother had financially exploited an old person. The case was taken up again. I was informed by my attorney that my parents were formally being examined. The bank had frozen all shared accounts until the review was finished. But there have been no criminal charges as of yet. Word then made its way to their church. My parents weren't merely guests. My mother managed charitable programs, collected donations, and planned events. Although she was regarded as a community leader, a church member examined the documents and discovered that she was responsible for a suspicious number of errors, missing money, and receipts that didn't match deposits. Soon after, their landlord contacted me. She was subtly asked to resign. He informed me that when my parents renewed their lease, they unintentionally listed me as a financial cosigner. I enclosed evidence of the fraud and sent him a notarized declaration denying any connection. As a result, the monthly sum was raised and their rental agreement was reassessed. The higher price was beyond their means. A neighbor told me later that week that my parents were holding a garage sale to stay afloat, not to make some extra cash. My dad's equipment was sold. Their television, antique furniture, and jewelry belonging to my mother. Those who had formerly admired them were now passively observing from their windows. They questioned how the picture-perfect marriage with the prosperous kid had come to be in this situation. They didn't just fall apart, though. The same individuals who had deceived and misled them brought them down. It was similar to witnessing a house gradually come apart, each brick loosened by years of deceit. We were all now kicking down what remained. It was no longer just me. Furthermore, they weren't alone themselves. However, no one in their immediate vicinity was attempting to assist them this time. They never got the space and perhaps the truth they sought. Everything eventually came to a halt. No emails, no phone calls, and no updates from relatives. No phony worry cloaked in guilt. Nothing but quiet. I had no idea that stillness could be so fulfilling. All of my parents' relationships had been formally destroyed. After getting a letter filled with remorse from their new lawyer, urging him to abandon his case, Brandon blocked their numbers. Angela proceeded with her civil action and gave their whole history to a tiny news organization that was covering a story about inheritance, misuse, and small-scale family frauds. No names were given. But the narrative was familiar to everyone who knew my parents. Like she promised, my sister and her fiancé moved out. As we closed the rear door, she remarked. I assisted her in loading the moving truck. They seemed to have shrunk. Do you recall how large they appeared to us as children? I understood her meaning well. They appeared weak, exhausted, resentful, and vulnerable. Yet we had grown up believing they were untouchable. In a matter of weeks, their house was listed. The mounting costs were beyond their means. The utility bills were past due. They had lost their automobile. They were barely surviving on what was left. The church no longer has the money they previously boasted about. Lost. Assistance from their former pals and the community. Lost. Their pain wasn't unjust. All they were doing was standing there amid the wreckage of the hurricane they had caused. I seldom gave life any attention after that. Continued. Stephen walked for the first time. Nancy's business was growing. And I discovered a new strength I was unaware I possessed. I no longer felt bad about prioritizing my own family. Every time I put anything down, I stopped looking back. Shortly after everything had calmed down, one evening, after supper, Nancy and I were cleaning up. It was only the two of us in the kitchen. And Stephen had gone to bed early. She said, "You're not the same man I married." As I was stacking dishes, a little taken aback, I turned around. "You're better now," she remarked, glancing at me. "More powerful." She spoke steadily. "No mocking. No green." She spoke as though she had been suppressing it for some time. I didn't respond. With a wet plate in my hand, I stood there, heart pounding. It meant so much to me that I wanted to tell her. I wanted to express my concern that I hadn't done enough and how hard I had fought to change. But I was unable to do so. After turning out the light, she walked out of the kitchen. For a while, I was in the dark. After a lifetime of attempting to win over people who saw me as a tool, a human ATM without a voice. It felt foolish to get so passionate over a single statement. The one person whose opinion really mattered had just seen me. And oddly, I wasn't going to tell anyone about it. Not my sister. Not my pals. Not Reddit. The situation was embarrassing. It was simply intimate. As though I had merited it via sacrifice, suffering, and quiet. I didn't want to share it as a tale because I didn't want to make it seem cheap. I didn't require accolades for the first time in my life. In addition to severing my relationship with my parents, I was glad that I had stopped letting other people define what was good. I had a son who would never feel like someone's afterthought. A woman who genuinely saw me. And a youngster who would grow up understanding what honesty looked like. And I was at ease for the first time. True tranquility. Sturdy and powerful. Not need the permission of others. Not everyone manages to get away. I did. But people like my parents. Retaliation did not earn me the victory. I prevailed by walking away without turning around. I had no intention of reopening anything. And it had been 4 months since I left. It was all quiet. We proceed. Now Stephen was out and about, talking non-stop. Nancy and I were preoccupied with routine matters. Routines that are cheerful and normal. Then an unexpected event occurred. Last week, I got a letter. It was written by hand. The envelope had no sender's name on it. Although the lettering appeared familiar, I was unable to recognize it. I assumed it was from an old family member. There, near the mailbox. I opened it. My grandfather gave it to me. The father of my dad. I hadn't watched that one since I was a teenager. What about the twist I believed he was dead? He hadn't. He had just turned to go. The message was succinct and direct. He said, "No sweet words." Samuel had finally broken the chain. According to someone in town. That was his wording. He then wrote, "When your father reached adulthood, I departed because I was unable to make amends for the damage I had created. I couldn't figure out how to stop him from being who I used to be." I read that section over and over again while I stood on the driveway. He claimed to have been living in seclusion out west. Never getting married again. And being totally cut off from his family. He didn't believe he had the right to contact anyone. Therefore he never did. However, he had heard about the events and the consequences. And he prayed that I wouldn't disappear as he did. He said that the fact that someone had finally broken the cycle meant something to him. This is how he ended the letter. "I'd want to meet the man who accomplished what I was never able to. If you're ever interested in talking." I was unsure of how to respond. I have yet to respond to him. Nancy just said, when I informed her, "Now it's your choice." Not theirs. She was referring to my parents. Each and every one. Even their recollection. I'm not sure if I'll reply. Perhaps I will. I might not. However, it has stayed with me. Not in an agonizing manner. Just a surprise. I believed the door was locked. But it opened. I pondered how far this whole thing extends. For what length of time has this harm been inherited? Here's what I do know. Though, I have the opportunity to put an end to it. None of this is known to Stephen. He sees his mom grinning. His dad at home. And the three of us dancing foolishly in the kitchen on the weekends. He will never have to send his own child a letter like this. That's what counts. That's what I hold dear. Yes. Probably not the last chapter. But one I didn't anticipate.